Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2019 Regional Transition IEP Training webinar, Everything Counts. This is Mary Held from the Center on Community Living and Careers and the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center. And I'm joined today by Ann Higley from Center on Community Living and Careers, who is very kindly helping us with technology and chat rooms and polls, and Mike Nevins, who is from the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center, and Michelle Oja from IDOE.
Hello, this is Mike Nevins. I'm going to go through a few little things about housekeeping as we do the webinar. I believe that you all have your microphones muted now, so if you could just keep those muted, that helps a lot with feedback. If you do have questions, please post any questions on the chat. We will have some times throughout the webinar that we'll stop to answer questions. We might also answer some questions as we go, so just post all your questions on chat. If you could also put, if you're participating in a group, more than one person watching on the same computer, if you could please put your name and email in the chat so we can have your name in case that's if you want certificates. You can also put that in the Padlet that I'm going to show you in a minute that we will have, you can put your name in there for your certificates for after the webinar. We will have some polls coming up, and if you could please participate in those as they come on. And then right now I'm going to try to share the Padlet with you. Is that what they say?
Yep.
Okay, this is the Padlet, and that has all the resources and information on it. The first one, if you want a copy of this presentation, it's in this first column here. And as you scroll down, there's case studies with sample IEPs that we used at our in-person regionals that you have access to on here. And then we'll talk about some of these at the end with all the pictures of that. At the very end is the evaluation for when it's done. And
show them the form.
And then right here is your form for your points if you'd like a certificate for doing the webinar. There's resources that we will talk about throughout the presentation that are on this column. And you can kind of look through this whole Padlet. There's a lot of information on there.
Yeah, this one. There you go.
And then now, so this is our first poll. And as it comes up, if you could answer that for us so we can get an idea of who's all on.
You're not seeing the poll? I'm not seeing the poll.
Not yet. It's coming. Oh, we're seeing.
Yeah, do it for me. My glasses. I need my glasses.
I just watched it.
So the first thing about this poll is we want you to know that everybody counts, just like everything counts, every person counts. So if you could share, since we can't go around and introduce each other, who you are and how long you've been in your current position, that'd be super. And then once the answers are in, we'll be able to share it with you. Looks like we've got a lot of teachers on. Couple of department chairs. You're not seeing it either.
I saw it, but then I off-clicked it.
Okay. We'll wait just another second for a few more people to participate in the poll. And it looks like we have a lot of experienced people on the webinar today, more than 15 years. Half of you are have been in the field more than 15 years, and some of you are just starting, and we welcome you. Just one more second, and then we'll move on. Well, that's great. Thank you for participating. It's good to know who we have. A few related service folks, coordinators, and we have some parents. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results with you. So that's great. We've got some related services folks. We have some pre-ETS folks. Welcome to you from VR. We love that you're doing this with us. That's great. Thank you for letting us count you. Many of you may know that the Department of Education in Indiana funds a number of resource centers, and Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center is one of them, but we are one of many. And please know that these are available to help you in your school districts. You should feel free to contact them on the Department of Education website. You can go there and you see the link here on the screen and find out what they do and how to get in touch with them. We do quite a bit of collaboration between the centers. Just to introduce the Secondary Transition Resource Center, Judith Gross is our center director, and Kathleen Hardy-Hansen is our project director, and Wendy Ritz is the other person who we didn't mention. She's on vacation in Disney World this week, so we're missing her. So here's what we thought we'd talk about this afternoon. We want to share some things that are happening across the state that are new. And we want to talk about the transition IEP monitoring process. And Michelle's going to share with you some of the tiered technical assistance when you have IEPs that may not be compliant. We're going to briefly, very briefly, touch on the transition portfolio, do an overview of all the important parts of the transition IEP and what we've seen that's working well and what we as a state may want to do a little bit better on. What kind of trends we're seeing happening across the state.
So good afternoon, everyone. This is Michelle Oja. So as Mary said, some positive happenings in transition around the state. So the Certificate of Completion course of study is now in full effect and is being fully implemented across the state. This is also the first group of freshmen who are fully participating in graduation pathways, although upperclassmen are able to opt into them. Then the State Board of Education has begun working on the rulemaking for the alternate diploma. So make sure that you're keeping an eye out for more details about that. The Governor's Work Ethics Certificate has been issued to several students across our state and is a really great tool for students who are looking for ways to demonstrate their employability skills. We, in May, the State Board of Education approved the employability skills standards that are now being implemented throughout the state, and they are going to be really great because they are cross-curricular, meaning that students will be exposed to them in all subject areas. We have been doing quite a bit of work with pre-ETs and expanding that across our state. Vocational rehabilitation has been really key in collaborating with us at the Department of Education about that. And we currently have a pilot going on with some pre-ETs providers as well as some school corporations to clarify how to best collaborate and work together. I'm going to have Mike Nevins now tell you some of the other things that are happening around the state.
Okay, I'm going to skip on down to talk a little bit about FEAT, the Family Employment Awareness Training. FEAT was a training that we piloted last fall in the Northeast cadre of Indiana, and it's a training that provides information to parents and to people with disabilities about benefits and best practices involving employment and how to get and maintain jobs. We plan on doing another training for that in April. And if you hear about the FEAT training coming around to your area, it'd be something really to look into and to invite parents to.
And this is Mary again, and I was going to tell you about career and technical education. The National Center for Transition and Technical Assistance has state teams. So every state has a team, and their job is to make transition better in their state and come up with a plan for what they think they should focus on and move forward in that direction. So Indiana has a state team, and we went to the national conference, and it was decided that our team was going to focus on career and technical education and students with disabilities, and to try to, with a focus on more employment for students with disabilities when they graduate, to think about why aren't more students with disabilities enrolled in career tech ed, and why aren't they completing more certifications or licenses as a result of that. And so the team has been busy working on gathering data from all kinds of places across Indiana to look at what centers are doing really well in terms of supporting students with disabilities and which might not be doing as well, and why the ones that are doing well, so that we can spread the word across the state. And then we wanted to tell you about Finder from the Anthony Wayne Foundation. This is a new resource, and Mike, is the link on the Padlet?
It is.
Okay, so the link to that is on the Padlet, and it is a wonderful website where all things related to disability are housed. You can search by disability type, you can search by subject matter, And this is a project that's building and building and getting better every day. Take a look at it, because you'll be able to add your schools to it at some point if they're not already there. But there's a lot of information for students and families available on Finder. And we want to keep growing it for our state. And then finally, the Center on Community Living and Careers has a grant from the Governor's Planning Council about self-employment, and they are holding statewide information sessions across the state that parents and students are welcome to attend. They are having one on November 20th at Crossroads in Indianapolis from 9:30 to 12:30. And the link to register for that is also on the Padlet.
Okay, just a reminder, as you do have questions, please post any questions you might have on the chat. We're getting ready to talk about the monitoring process now. So as we talk about the monitoring process, each district or cooperative in the state is broken down into 3 groups. And each of those, and you're in one of those groups each year. And there's 3 years. The self-monitoring is a year when districts and co-ops can monitor their IEPs internally. And then the proactive year is a year where the districts will get feedback. Their IEPs are monitored. And then the districts get feedback to kind of do some self-evaluation. During the federal year is when the data is collected and then sent to the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education. We're going to go through each of those 3 years to talk about them more specifically in a minute. A little more information on how that is done is the STNs, whenever IEPs are monitored, are randomized, and then 3% of a district's transition IEPs is what's monitored. And that's a minimum of 3 IEPs, no matter how small the district is, and a maximum of 10 IEPs. During that proactive year is a year when the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center can provide training to the school. So during that year is a really important time for those schools to reach out for training.
So year 1 is all about using a self-monitoring system. So what is available to you is a Google form, which is a online version of the Indicator 13. Which is a self-monitoring tool that's taking the checklist and making it so that it's fillable. And this can allow you to do IEP reviews internally and have reviews between teachers through PLC time. And the school corporations who have started using this tool have provided a lot of really great feedback on it. And I think it's really a great way to take a look at what you're able to see as far as what is compliant and what's not amongst your IEPs without having that proactive or that federal pull happening. And then there's some other resources that you can make sure that you're sharing with your teachers or that you're accessing through the INSTRC website. The first is the IEP rubric, and that is came out last year, and it has examples of quality, compliant, and non-compliant for each component of the IEP. And then there's the Making the Connection, which talks about how to go from those post-secondary goals to transition activities and services and everything in between. So there's a lot of really great resources out there available to really help make sure that IEPs are not just compliant, but quality. And I hope that you're able to take a look at them. Those are also, I believe, available as resources on the Padlet, and Mike is shaking his head. I know you can't see us today. So that you are able to access them right through the Padlet today, which is great. Mike, you want to talk about year 2?
So in the second year, which is called proactive monitoring, another random poll gets done in December or January, and the INSTRC team and the Department of Education meet together on an ongoing basis to talk about IEPs that we are looking at and come to consensus on the indicator 13 aspects of the IEP. And then from January to March, the IEPs are actually reviewed for compliance using the IEP checklist that's aligned with indicator 13. And then in April, the reports are submitted with lots of feedback to LEAs and districts. From May of that year to June of the following year, that's when the Secondary Transition Resource Center can offer free training and technical assistance to schools and help them improve what they're doing.
And then in the third year, the federal monitoring year is when the IEPs are officially monitored. And that actual review happens throughout the summer from June to August. But before that is when, and actually this consensus building is really a year-long process where the people that get together to monitor those IEPs are constantly talking about quality and compliant components of the IEP to make sure that everybody is saying the same thing. In September or October is when the quick fixes come out. And the quick fixes are things that can be changed, minor problems with the IEP that a district will get information about that they can fix and then turn in before that IEP is found non-compliant. Things like that would be a quick fix might be if the check mark on the goal written to support in an annual goal statement was not selected, that could be a quick fix. Also, if that was happening in the transition service section where just employment or education and training or independent living wasn't checked, that could be a quick fix. So the quick fix is something that does not change a major part of the IEP. If the IEP had other problems with it that made it non-compliant, then that quick fix wouldn't matter anyway. But in your report back about the IEP, that information would be explained on what was non-compliant about the IEP. And once that information comes out for the federal monitoring year, from November to November of the next year is when, for schools that are in the tiered technical assistance that you're going to hear about here in a little bit, that's when those schools will get that training throughout that time. And then in February is when the final data information is submitted for compliance. A few other things about our principles on how we're monitored is IEPs are looked to meet just minimal federal compliance. It's not like a gotcha system where we're trying to find things non-compliant. For an example, if one annual goal is compliant and there's 4 other non-compliant annual goals, that section will be found compliant. You have to have one annual goal, but that it is important that that annual goal addresses all the students' post-secondary goals for that section to be compliant. And the same thing with transition services. If there's one compliant transition service that addresses all the students' post-secondary goals, that section is compliant. The monitors also look for responses in other sections. So they will look through the present levels, which are very important to have a good present levels in the IEP. And they'll read through notes too, to kind of look for information that'll make that IEP compliant. It's been an emphasis on making sure and looking not for federal compliance, but for state compliance, looking for skill-based annual goals. And also in your reports, the monitors are trying to send more information about quality comments. So things that are looking good on the IEPs, you should start seeing more of that on the IEPs, not just negative comments, but things that look good.
I'm out of compliance for indicator 13. Now what? Well, the first thing is technical assistance in order to bring school corporations into compliance. And now we're doing a tiered system based on the percentage of non-compliance. This is different from in years past, where it was kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. The main focus of technical assistance is to make sure there's a mutual understanding or consensus between the fine folks at the Department of Education and the fine folks at your school corporation in order to be able to better prevent future non-compliance. So there's 3 tiers to technical assistance, and sometimes those tiers are broken into subcategories. So tier 3 is 0% to 49% not compliance. So if you have 49% compliance, you'd be in tier 3. From 50% to 74% is tier 2, and then from 51% to 100% is tier 1. If you're 100% compliant, you do not have a finding, and therefore you're not necessarily receiving technical assistance. However, technical assistance is offered by the Department of Education any year in the rotation schedule, and that's why 100% is listed here. So what happens at each of these levels? So tier 1 is when there is a corrective action plan. Any non-compliant IEP that was in that federal poll needs to be revised and be brought into compliance. We might also have a professional development plan, an on-site visit, a phone call from me or one of the other education specialists, or a technical assistance plan that involves some capacity building amongst your staff. At the tier 2 level, the same information is going on. However, there will be some professional development and either an on-site visit or a phone call with either myself or one of the other education specialists. At tier 3, we're really wanting to figure out what is going on that is causing a systematic situation where we're not being compliant when it comes to indicator 13. So there's a lot of intense technical assistance that occurs. Phone conversations with myself or one of the other educational specialists in the Office of Special Education. One thing that will happen. One on-site visit or more might happen. Developing professional development for the rest of the school year in which the finding is issued, or the following school year, depending on availability of both your staff and one of our specialists, and just really getting a good understanding of why the breakdown is. New this school year is transition portfolios. Transition portfolios are for all students with IEPs, regardless of what their graduation is, so whether they're diploma or certificate of completion. It's beginning with the class of 2023. However, some schools are opting to have their 8th grade students, the class of 2024, start portfolios to take advantage of career and college readiness course offerings at the middle school level. There is a recorded webinar that's available for you to check out that goes through Indiana Career Explorer, the different components of the portfolio, and Google Sites. And that webinar was done with Wendy before she left for Disney. So feel free to take a look at that. There's also a guidance document and a how-to guide along with some other resources that are available at the link on this page. These links, the link to the webinar and the link to the resources will be available on Padlet either now or at the end of the presentation today. Now we have questions.
So we're getting ready to go through the transition IEP, and we'll talk about some trends that we're seeing with the monitoring. But before we do that, we'll take just a minute. If you have any questions over the portfolio or things that we had talked about here so far, kind of post some of those up. And then we'll get going on the transition IEP.
We'll give you another minute or so to write your questions if you have any.
Okay, so as we talk about the transition IEP, we talk a lot about alignment. The most important thing in the transition IEP is that it aligns to that student's post-secondary goals. It's about making that connection between what the student wants to do after high school and what their education is while they're in school. The IEP should include several services and activities that help that student get to those post-secondary goals. Just because there is a compliant IEP doesn't necessarily mean that there is going to be good teaching happening. But that transition IEP, when it's done correctly, then is that blueprint for teachers to use that gets to quality teaching. This you also have on the Padlet, the picture of the process of the transition IEP. And these are all the sections that we're going to go through. So it starts off with what we know about the student, the present levels. And then we can decide what we need to know by the assessments, which then leads to the post-secondary goals, and then the services and the annual goals. As we go through the whole IEP process, you're going to see some slides that look like this. And just to explain what they are a little bit, the top part's going to be what should be seen in the IEP, the quality component, and then the bottom part is what was seen sometimes in monitoring that needs to be more quality. So as we start with present levels, this is a screenshot of the present levels section of the IIEP. And this section is not part of Indicator 13. Present levels are not part of that, but it's very important to leading to the rest of the IEP. Without a good present levels and information in progress monitoring, you're not going to have a well-aligned rest of the IEP. Things that should be in there, a thorough description should be present in there, that in some districts have found that using headings or a template have helped those districts have more quality present levels. Should be more information in there than just test and grade scores. If test and grade scores are used in there, a description on what those scores mean should be included. IEPs that were seen in monitoring that did not have a good thorough description, and the rest of the IEPs usually showed non-compliant annual goals and transition services that were not well connected to the students' post-secondary goals. Things that were found important were using headings or templates and writing the present levels. Having coworkers evaluate. Some districts, you have an in-house system to where they have other teachers monitor each other's IEPs just to make sure for quality and compliance. And then we also always talk about with the present levels that doesn't pass the stranger test. If somebody was reading those present levels that didn't know that student, after reading the present levels, would they have a good idea of what annual goals and what services that student may need? So now we have a poll. In just a minute. You can also put in chat, but we're going to have the poll come up in a minute too. But talk about what strategies have you found in your district or school that helps put out quality present levels? You can type some of that in chat for a minute, and then we'll get on with the rest of the presentation.
I know. Technical difficulties, apologies. So when you think about present levels and how you, or if you're a teacher or if you're an administrator, how you support teachers in writing present levels, which of these do you use most often? Just another minute. Looks like a lot of folks are using headings or a template to organize, and that's really awesome. And lots of folks are using peer review and some administrator review and some the stranger method. So that's great. So now you're seeing what all your peers posted. All right.
So after we know decide what we know about the student in the present levels, then we move on to transition assessments. So on your screen right now is a quality example from IIEP of what the transition assessment list should look like. If you notice a few things on that list, one is as it lists the names of the assessment, in parentheses next to the assessment is the post-secondary goal that it's addressing. That would not make it non-compliant. That's just a quality way to show the assessments. There's also, like this student would be about a junior, maybe a senior in high school. And so there's a well-rounded list of assessments. The same assessments aren't repeated. There's some authentic assessments and some more formal assessments. There's a parent interview, which that can be used as an assessment. A person-centered plan, which I love person-centered plans, but they could be used as a transition assessment too. And they really show a lot of good information for the student. Please remember as we're going on, if you have questions about some of these slides, to post them in the chat. Something else that's important is to put the most current assessments at the top. In that new position column, you can rearrange the order. So always when you're listing assessments, put the most current assessments at the top. So important things about transition assessments is they have to be done every year in the areas of employment and education and training. And then if the student has an independent living post-secondary goal, they also will need a new assessment on that. The initial independent living assessment has to stay in the IEP. So when the student first has the transition IEP done, they must do that independent living assessment. I want to make sure assessments are real and useful. If you noticed on that previous page, there was the student dream sheet was done for the student when they were in middle school. Just things like that. If the student already knows what they want to do, the dream sheet wouldn't be an appropriate assessment for a junior or senior in high school that already has a post-secondary goal in employment. So make sure that assessments are purposeful for the student. And then all assessments, whenever you're deciding what assessments to use, should help the student find a path, stay on a path, or find a new path. And what that means is in connection to their post-secondary goals. So if the student does not quite know what they want to do with employment yet, then assessment should lead to help that student decide what that choice might be. If they do know what they want to do, then that assessment might help them refine that goal some or make it more specific. Transition assessment should address the students' what we call SPIN, the strengths, preferences, interests, and needs in each of their post-secondary goal areas. And that's because the summary of findings, which we're going to talk about in a second, must lead straight to the student's post-secondary goals. And IEPs that did not include a very good description of the student's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs did not show a good connection to their post-secondary goals. Transition assessment should be ongoing. What we mean by that is conducted every year in a different assessment every year and varied. If the same assessment is used, that's why a good quality transition IEP is going to have multiple transition assessments. So the same assessments, you can't use the same single assessment every year. There should be multiple assessments. Non-compliant IEPs showed that some of those had the same assessment used every year as the only assessment. Something else that should be seen in the IEPs is if the case conference committee has determined that the student does not require an independent living post-secondary goal, that same initial independent living assessment must still be included in the IEP. And there were a few non-compliant IEPs, and the reason they were non-compliant was because the independent living assessment was nowhere to be found, and there was no description of it in the notes or in the summary of findings. So IEP should help that student find a path, stay on a path, or find a new path in connection to their post-secondary goals. And some summary of findings from age-appropriate transition assessments included little information on that area.
Before we move away from transition assessments, we have a question from one of our viewers who said, where will we find a list of all possible assessments to use?
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a good thing to answer for the whole group.
It will. There's a lot of different places to find transition assessments. We have our matrix that's on our website that you do have a link to in the Padlet that you can search for assessments depending on the student's disabilities and on their the area that you want on, either in employment, education and training, or independent living skills. But that isn't the only place to do assessments. We talk a lot about authentic assessments, which are examples on our matrix, but an assessment could be an interview. An assessment could be a task analysis. As long as it connects, you're doing an assessment that relates to the student's post-secondary goals, and that's a transition assessment.
Well, this is just an aside, but where did you tell me yesterday that you were looking and they had a really good website?
I will find that and maybe post it on there too if I can find the link. We were just looking yesterday and it was in Tennessee. They have something very similar to ours, a matrix that where you can look up assessments, and on that site you can also look up by language. So you could put in Spanish and they'll show you Spanish transition assessments. And I hadn't truthfully have the time to look at it real well yet, but it looked potentially like a kind of a neat site. Whenever I get that exact link, we'll put that on Padlet. Oh yeah, and then that in the chat, if you look, we have a link to that matrix too on there. Some things that are important whenever we're talking about transition assessments is to make sure they're done every year and varied, and really think about using authentic assessments. We also, whenever we're talking authentic, you don't have to use an assessment just like you find it. Make that assessment valuable for that student. Sometimes you might just want to use a few questions from a more formal assessment. You don't have to use it exactly like it comes. Make it useful. So, yep.
As an aside, I just want to let everyone know this webinar is being recorded and will be made available through INSTRC, as well as the Moodle community and the DOE website when we are done with our updating of the website, which will be happening in November. So the webinar will be available through all those locations, and then the Padlet does not go away. So I would take a second and kind of copy and paste that link so that you have access to it after the webinar.
On the screen now is a screenshot of the summary of findings of transition assessments. The format that is used for this cannot make an IEP non-compliant. So the example that's on the screen, we consider a quality example, and it's a great way to organize the information by putting the 3 post-secondary goal areas: employment, education and training, and independent living. Important things you want to do is, if you noticed on that example, the name of the assessments put in there with the date it was given, and then a really thorough description about the student's spin, strengths, preferences, interests, and needs as they connect to each post-secondary goal. Important things to remember to put in that summary is the name of the assessment, the data was given, the strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, and then also make sure that after reading that summary of findings, it should be, somebody should be able to know what the student's post-secondary goals are going to be. It should lead straight to those. That's the preferences part of the spin. So make sure that the summary is leading to, if the student wants to be a welder, then it connects to some assessment. You got that information from there. It doesn't have to be that direct. Maybe if the student just knows some certain qualities or things that he's looking for in a job, or some interest that might lead to a job, but that should lead straight to the student's post-secondary goals. Summary of findings that were just incomplete and not very thorough did not connect to the student's post-secondary goals, and they were non-compliant IEPs. Things that are important whenever you're thinking about writing the summary of findings is to think about maybe using headings, assessment titles, and dates to organize the summaries. Make sure that you describe what is learned about the student from assessments. Sometimes what was seen was a description of the assessment. So it described what the student was going to learn, but it really didn't include the information on what was actually learned about the student from the assessment. make sure that's included in the summary. And make sure that the original independent living assessment information is included.
So now we'd like to know what strategies you're using in your school or district to ensure that you're doing quality transition assessments. Looks like everybody's busy responding. We'll give it another minute.
I'd like to see who's using the checklist and the rubric if they do.
Yeah, it's nice to see that you're all using the checklist and the rubric. That'll make a big difference. And also that you're using headings and templates for your summary of findings. I think it helps us not forget to write down all the things that we know about our students. Okay, let me share the results with you. So it looks like a lot of folks are using headings and the checklist and the rubric. Some are using the review process, which can also be helpful. And we wanted to let you know that the checklist and the rubric will be updated soon and coming out to you for your use. All right. Thank you for your participation.
On your screen now is a screenshot of the post-secondary goal section. And this one is showing for a student that does not have an independent living goal. So whenever you select yes, that the student has achieved sufficient skills for independent living, then that side evidence box comes up. If the student needed an independent living goal, that would be an independent living post-secondary goal. The important things about post-secondary goals, they must have come directly from the age-appropriate transition assessments. So I know, as special ed teachers, we know our students, and we could probably go around and say what their post-secondary goals are, but they need to come from assessments. It needs to be aligned in the IEP, not just from our heads. There must be an employment and education and training post-secondary goal that are aligned with the student's preferences. Those goals need to be long-term and come directly from the assessments. Phrases to look out for that would make a goal non-compliant would be like if the student thinks he might, or anything that's not leading to a direct statement is non-compliant. It doesn't mean that you have to know exactly what the student doesn't have to know as an 8th grader, exactly what career they want, but you might align it to their interest. You might align it to some different things, quality traits in a job that they like, but don't put in statements similar to those. Things that are important when talking about post-secondary goals is linking them to the assessments. Make sure that the goals are student-driven, even though sometimes Teachers have beliefs on what they think about the student, and parents have beliefs. Those post-secondary goals are what the student's goals are. And make sure on those goal statements you're keeping it simple. You don't want to add in a lot of extra information. Any extra information that's maybe connected to that could be in the summary of findings from assessments, but not in the post-secondary goal statements. They should be direct and simple. So the next thing we're going to go straight into is transition services. So hopefully if you've done an IEP recently, you've seen that section is now moved. So that's why we go to services next. And this is a good move because the services, the most important things about a service is that they're individualized and aligned to the student's post-secondary goals. So they should be connected straight to those post-secondary goals, is why they're moved now in IIEP to right after post-secondary goals. If you notice in that screenshot, they're showing a description of each of the part of the service. In that description box, I like to think of that description as more of a title of the service. Just what is that service's name or what are they doing? And the narrative is a full description of what that service is. You really want to use that narrative. I know we talked about post-secondary goals and not being too wordy. You don't want to get overly wordy in there, but definitely use that narrative to really explain how that service is directly connected to the student's specific post-secondary goals. There must be a school personnel in the by whom section. It can't just be by parent and student. There must be a school personnel in the by whom section. And then make sure in the to support section that you're checking the correct box for which post-secondary goal that service is addressing. Things to think about with services, make sure that you are addressing each post-secondary goal. And we talk about this with assessments, but also transition services should help a student choose a path, find a path, or stay on a new path as connected to their post-secondary goals. And to be compliant, the service must be individualized and aligned to the goals and be meaningful for the student. Something that was seen a couple times to make a service non-compliant was a service that was really a special ed service, like student will receive speech services and the narrative just explained the time. That is a special ed service, not a transition service. So do make sure that you're writing something specific. There might be an activity that the speech therapist is doing that is a transition service, but you need to describe that activity in the narrative. Not just student will receive speech services. The most common non-compliant services were just because they didn't include any information or they just didn't support the student's specific post-secondary goals. Some of the real common non-compliant services might be the student is going to meet with their guidance counselor to plan their Core 40 diploma. That is a non-compliant transition service because it's not individualized. What might be compliant with that is research employment careers related to nursing. If the student wants to be a nurse and they're going to research career options with nursing with their guidance counselor, that would be compliant because it's specific for that student. So make sure that as you're writing services, they're connected straight to the student's post-secondary goals and help that student find a path, stay on a path, or create a new path. Things that seem to help when writing services is making sure that there's a thorough narrative for each service and that you're writing, make sure that a school personnel is identified and kind of be inventive when thinking of services. This is the section of the IEP where you can really think about what activities as a teacher am I doing that's really helping that specific student reach their post-secondary goals? So they don't have to be the same common thing. They can be something, as an example, there was we had a training I was at, a student wanted to be a landscaper, and their future was they did not plan to drive, and even though I might not like the post-secondary goal of living with their parents forever and ever, that was that student's goal. So their service was that they were going to research landscaping companies within a certain radius of their house. So that's specific for that student, connects to their post-secondary goal, and will help them out in the future. So kind of think about activities and services that will help students out similar to that. So next is everyone's favorite, annual goals. On your screen is a screenshot of the annual goal for my IEP. Some things I want to point out in here is that the present levels in specially designed instruction are very important as it leads to developing a quality annual goal statement, but that's not part of indicator 13 monitoring. So the present levels in SDI cannot make it non-compliant, but IEPs that had not quality present levels in SDI a lot of times aren't going to have a quality annual goal statement, because it's hard to really lead to that quality annual goal statement if you don't know where that student was with present levels, or you don't know how you're going to teach that skill. So although they're very important, we like to point out they're not part of indicator 13 monitoring. So the annual goal statements must address the student's most current significant barrier, which is a good thing, because whenever we're thinking about the student's barrier, we don't have to write an annual goal for every single thing we're doing as a special ed teacher. We would have a huge book of an IEP for every student. So just think about the most significant barriers for that student, and that's what you're going to write the annual goal statements for. The annual goals should address a need that was identified in the present levels. And the needs do go in the present levels, not in the specially designed instruction box. A lot of times we would see needs in there. The needs go in the present levels. And when reading an annual goal statement, multiple evaluators should be able to agree on when it's met. So no matter who looks at it, it should just be that you can look at the data and it's just a given if the goal is met or not. It shouldn't be up in the air or ambiguous. One person decides it's met and somebody else thinks it's not. Annual goals should be written pretty direct. This is a great resource for how to write a compliant annual goal statement. And you do have a picture of this. You have it on the presentation that's on the Padlet. You also have a separate in the resources where just this is pulled out separately. These are the 4 parts that should be in a quality annual goal statement. A given, which describes the conditions where that goal is going to be. The who is the student. The does what, and that's where we're talking about the skill. What skill is that goal addressing? And the when is the measurable part of the annual goal statement. Something that was seen a lot in annual goals is to be measurable, the annual goal statement has to measure the skill identified. So we did see an increase in skills identified in the goal statements, but sometimes they were still non-compliant because the measurement part wasn't measuring the skill. So you have an example of a non-compliant goal on your screen right now. It has a good skill. The student is requesting a quiet space break, but that measurement is not measuring the skill, which I know that's an outcome we want. That's what I always want as a teacher. Please stop going to the office and having the assistant principal send me nasty emails about you being down there. But even though that's what I want, we have to make sure that we're writing a goal that's going to measure that. So measuring office referrals is not measuring the skill of if the student requested a quiet space break. So there's a compliant example. And these goals, by the way, I think you could look at them and we can talk about it if you want a little bit, but they could probably be made a little bit better in some ways too. We're just showing you compliant examples. I do think maybe it might be more quality to define what angry looks like, because I know what one person thinks angry is, another person might not. So you could make that go a little better, but this is a compliant example. So see how it measures the skill of requesting a quiet space break, and it's actually just measuring, did the student request that break or not? It's not measuring if they are going to the office less, it's measuring the skill. Another problem that was seen more often was goals should be written to address the student specific needs. But we saw an increase of annual goals that were pretty much just simply a copy of a standard. And they put a student's name in front of a standard and then put the annual goal and change the wording a little bit. The problem with that is it can turn the goal to addressing multiple skills sometimes. So in this example, the standard's taken, but the goal is addressing multiple skills. To be measurable, it has to measure a single skill. Then there's a compliant example, kind of fixes the top one. See, in the given, it shows that the student's going to use a graphic organizer. The skill is the student's just going to identify 3 supporting details related to the main idea. And the measurement is just measuring if the student did exactly that. Not answering comprehension questions about it. It's measuring, did the student identify 3 supporting details. Could be better too to identify how the student's going to identify, to explain how the student's going to identify those 3 supporting details. The other thing with annual goals is make sure they're clear and concise. We would see sometimes that they would just be, and I'm bad at this because I'm very wordy and I will write like I talk. So you got to be careful not to throw in everything in the kitchen sink too on an annual goal statement. Just write what the skill is that you're trying to get that student to address. This example on here is more, to me, is almost more of the student's present levels than really an annual goal statement. When talking about annual goals, so make sure you're addressing one skill. Make sure the goal statement is measuring the skill being taught. They're clear. It'd be good to use that template that was shown earlier with the colors. That really helps to write a good annual goal statement. And also the goal development checklist from the IEP Resource Center. It's on your Padlet. That's also a good resource to writing good goal statements. So now we've done the whole transition IEP, the process. And then after we develop these good services and goals, then the student will have good new present levels. And then the process happens all over again. And we do a whole new IEP every year. So let's take a few minutes because I know that was very fast going through that. Let's take a few minutes. If you have some questions, you can post us some questions down. We'll answer some.
Someone asked a question about if we're going to archive the webinar, and the answer is yes, we are. It will be, well, the actual presentation is on the Padlet already, but a recording of this webinar will be posted on the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center. And Michelle mentioned earlier that it would be on Moodle as well.
Yeah, that's what's next. Okay, so we'd like to go through some things and show you some of the resources on Padlet. So this is your Padlet that you have with all the resources. During the in-person regionals, there were in the afternoon sessions were broken down into stations where each participant took a case study and they went through the stations, each section of the transition IEP, and then created an IEP from that. So you have these examples that we used, which are also have the compliant IEPs with the case study. So if you want some examples straight of compliant parts of the IEP, they're in these case studies. All the resources we talked about are in this resources section. I wanted to point out a few. This first one, if you click on these, they blow up bigger for you, but I'm not going to click on each of these. I'm just going to slide down to show them to you. The checklist, if you can go through this checklist using that, and the next one, the Indiana IEP rubric, which breaks down each of those questions and gives compliant examples and non-compliant examples, that is a big help in completing an IEP. They're good resources to go back and reference to whenever questions come up. This transition services and connections and activities making the connection is specific to the transition services connection section. It gives a small case study and explains how those services need to connect to the post-secondary goals. It's another really good resource. And then if you scroll down, you'll see all kinds of different ones that we talked about throughout the presentation. And links are all down through here. So you can look through some of that. Now to explain some of these next ones are the stations that were used during the in-house regionals, in-person regionals. And there was a lot of comments that people liked the stations and they wanted to see examples and descriptions so that they could use them as they, in their own school, try to train. So we posted each of the stations with a description and all the pictures of how they looked. So those might be some other resources if you're trying to get some on whatever the different sections. So the first station, yeah.
I was just going to say, and all the documents that go with them are also posted.
Yeah. A lot of those documents that are on the stations are in the resource section, and some are on here with the pictures. Yep. Sure. How the stations worked at the regionals was every student was assigned a first station to start at, and then they went in order all the way through the transition IEP. So the first station was transition assessments for students with high support needs. And that was more of a resource station where there was a lot of information and examples of transition assessments that could be used with students with significant disabilities. The next station was authentic assessments, and it connected to some of the students in the case studies and showed examples of assessments that weren't formal assessments, but that were created that kind of a teacher could use on each of those students in the case study.
And it was a resource.
Yeah, it was a
station as
resource
well.
station too. The first one that was part of that had an activity was the transition assessment and post-secondary goals. And it's in the description of the station, but on that one, participants would go through and using their case study would try to look at a summary of findings and decide what the student's post-secondary goals should be for that student. The transition services station gave compliant examples that fit for that student. And it also showed some non-compliant examples that you have as resources in the resources section. And also, if you look at the case study IEPs, it shows all the compliant examples of transition services. There were a lot of comments about how some of these services that help people think about a different way of thinking about services and activities. So if you look at those case studies, it might be a good way to get some examples of services. The specially designed instruction station was another resource station that just talked a lot about what SDI is. You have all the resources that were used at that station in the resource section. And then the measurable annual goals were broken down into two stations. There was a measurable annual goal station and a skill-based annual goal station. In that first station, they looked at the first part of an annual goal, and then participants tried to write what they thought would make that goal measurable. Those and the compliant examples are in your case studies and the IEP samples for both of those stations. While I have this open here, before I go back to the presentation, I want to show you on this Padlet is the evaluation for the webinar. So whenever we're talking about going back to that, this is where that's located. And then also on here, you can click for a link, put in your information there for if you'd like a certificate, so you could then turn that into your school for PGPs. You can do that here by filling out the form here. And that last column was questions and feedback we got from the in-person regionals. And we will add any questions that came up at this webinar, and then all this will be sent out in a Tuesday tip in a few weeks. So that was a quick version through the transition IEP. If there are more questions, please send them on chat. We can answer some on there now. Also, if questions come up later, our email is on. Oh, we're forgetting an I there in the.
Should say Indiana.
Yeah, INSTRC at Indiana. And then please send us any other questions you have. That evaluation is located there on and also on the Padlet. Please fill out that evaluation of the webinar.
There we go. Well, this is silly. We can't bring the last slide back up again. It says thank you, but we want to thank you very much for being a part of the webinar today. And please feel free to email us with any questions that you might have about transition, or if you need resources to help you in your schools. We really appreciate you and everything that you do to make transition better in Indiana. So thanks much.